Nicolette Mashile is 'n TV-aanbieder en die stigter van Finansiële Bunny School, waar sy groot mense wys maak oor hul finansies. Verlede jaar het Nicolette 'n boek vir kinders geskryf, Coco The Money Bunny, wat binnekort omskep gaan word in 'n animasiereeks. Nicolette, welcome. It's such a privilege to have you on the show. You've started Finansiële Bunny School and TV, and then on top of that, you've written 2 books on financial education. Tell me, where did this interest start?
Sure, Divan, thank you very much for having me. I think, you know, when you have this idea that you're this educated person, right, and you've gone to school, you've got the degrees. However, when it comes to finances, when you're making decisions, you realize that they actually have a longer lasting effect on your life. So a couple of years ago, I tried to buy a house, signed the offer to purchase, didn't know about a suspensive clause. Went to the bank said, we can't give you that loan. And then I was like, okay, cool. Went back to the real estate agent and said, lady, I'm so sorry, I can't buy your house anymore.
Yeah.
She said to me, sasa, that's not hoe dit werk nie, hoor. So she told me I had to get all the banks to first decline me, and then that's how I can get out of the deal. Fortunately or unfortunately, I don't even know where to place it. One of the banks did come back with a grant. But when I looked at the numbers, Divan, I mean, I was going to borrow 2.7 million. They had given it to me over 30 years with an interest rate of 9%, but it's going to end up paying 8 million.
Yeah, it's insane.
And that for me, I mean, at that point, I didn't even realize there was a thing called financial literacy level. And I think at that point, I realized that the numbers don't make sense. But of course, because the suspensive clause in the offer to purchase was fulfilled, I was then legally obligated to buy this house.
Yeah.
And just by literally, you know, a little hole as small as one in a needle. That's how I got out of it. But I did settle out of court 125,000 rand.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I think I agree with you. I think the best lessons learned is when you can kind of hopefully see these pitfalls and make the mistakes. You kind of burn money, but it's okay.
Yes.
Let's talk about other pitfalls, financial pitfalls that you can see, well, in your life that adults do make.
Living above our means. I don't think we can actually conceptualize this idea. We've got a lot of people in South Africa, a lot of people globally who are just living beyond their means. And I'll tell you why they make that big mistake. It's because people don't budget. So if you don't budget, you actually don't know what's going on in your finances. And many of us, we assume we've got this great intellect to be able to remember all of the things that we pay for, but we only remember the fixed payment. So you'll remember your house bond, you'll remember the car, you'll remember the insurance, but the living expenses, that's what really costs a lot of people with their budget. So I think that's probably one of the biggest pitfalls that I've seen. And around that, we then created what's called a little apple analogy that we teach kids. So we always say you eat 8 apples, 2 you don't eat, 1 in the deep freezer, and 1 you plant. And that's how you live your life.
It's so simple. Let's talk about Coco the Money Bunny and the reason for you to focus on kids and financial education on kids specifically. I think Afrikaanse people don't talk about money. I think that's probably where the problem is. Did you get any financial education at this age, 6 to 12?
Absolutely not. From who?
Yeah.
You know, I think even now having financial conversations in our home, at home with my parents, is still hard for them because, you know, people turn up their nose to somebody who speaks about money all the time. You seem like somebody who's very greedy. But it's and I always say to people, whenever I have conversations with adults, I can see that there's childhood trauma that goes into how they make financial decisions. So it might not be like huge, like you've been abused or anything. It's just a way, if there's scarcity in the house, if you grew up in a house where they say, wait until the end of the month, you grow up with that. But let's be fair, if they say to you, Divan, wait until the end of the month, what happens at the end of the month? Because now we're not teaching you the difference between needs and wants. We're saying when there's money at the end of the month, you can get whatever that you want.
Yeah.
So we do need to start them young, and kids are very easy to absorb information, and they don't have preconceived ideas. Nobody has told them yet who they are, so they can kind of shape that.
Yeah.
And that is why it's important to get them as young as possible.
So obviously it's mainly parents listening to the show. If they work with their kids and they've got a 7-year-old, what can they expect from the book?
From the book, they can expect stories. Kids learn from stories. So Coco really goes on a journey. So unlike where you are teaching what is a budget, here we try to give real life examples. Also very South African, you know, so she goes to visit Granny. I know, you know, we're trying to fuse the different cultures. You know, she starts off a little business with her friend. They're trying to buy Christmas clothes. So it's really got an African flair, but the stories land and they teach the lessons as easy as possible.
What I love is the fact that you said, let's not stop at a book, let's make this an animation series. Tell me about that.
I'm so excited about the animation. It is going to be absolutely cute. Look, I think in South Africa, we don't have a lot of animation that are truly ours. We are borrowing quite a lot of stuff. But I mean, if you remember some of the old stuff that we used to have, you know, you've got these cartoon characters that a lot of us we can relate to them. And there's like a thing that you relate towards that specific cartoon character. And I think that's what we want with Coco. So that's why we animated it, so that, because kids also learn with all of their senses. It's not just reading, you know. We also don't want to discriminate against a child who doesn't like reading, which is okay. Yeah. So we want you to have the visual aid, the hearing, the video and everything. So this animated series really is to bring it all together, but also looking at the diversity of South Africa. I mean, we took this book to 3 different levels of schooling, I would say, in South Africa. So your public schools, your private schools, your semi-private schools. And we asked the teachers, at which age would you teach or read this book to? And it was just too varied. So we thought, okay, let's rather than have different types of ways to communicate the message. And what's better than an animation?
Absolutely. Man? It's fascinating when you listen on radio, this move that people want to be educated in their own language, whether it's Afrikaanse or isiXhosa, whatever that might be. Is that the trend that you are seeing, that we need to speak to people in their mother tongue?
Absolutely. And I was telling somebody now in the makeup room, I was like, language builds rapport. Even if I don't know how to speak your language fluently, but jy moet weet ek praat vlot Afrikaans, hoor jy. So even if I don't, I just feel like you feel a little bit of rapport when it comes to that. So what we've also done with Coco The Money Bunny is we've actually translated it. We've translated it into Afrikaans, into isiZulu, Swahili, Sesotho, and isiXhosa, just to make sure that, I mean, we already know these concepts are difficult. I mean, I always ask my mom every day, I'm like, what is budgeting in Sesotho, in Sepedi, what is it? And they aren't words, so we have to recreate those words. And I think that's what makes it a little bit difficult, yeah.
Nicolette, this was such a privilege having you here, and I wish you all the best with this.
Thank you so much. Yay.